To the cloud. There we go. Everyone, we're thrilled tonight to be joined by Mitch Wilson, live from a rum bunker somewhere in the south of France for a Black Tot Rum tasting. Mitch, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to our Black Tot tasting. We've got a really cool lineup for you today. We've got some of our limited editions throughout the years, some of our Master Blenders reserves, some of which are very hard to find these days. So we're going to do a little side by side of some of those. We're also going to try our core with Finest Caribbean and Historic Solera. So whether you are long-term fans and advocates for us like Brennan here, welcome back, or have got some people trying the rum for the first time. Also, if you're at home and you're listening live with us, please feel free to put on your video. It makes the whole thing a lot easier if I can see your reactions to things and
And I can add to that. Your video won't be displayed because it's on speaker view. So don't feel like, yeah, you won't be outed as being in this rum tasting, I guess is what we're saying. You're only going to see Mitch, Harmony, and I over the course of the tasting on
no,
the
I'm
YouTube.
totally going to take snapshots of all of you and send it to all your whiskey friends and tell them that you cheated on them and had some delicious rum instead. So,
Amazing.
no, so all right. So today we're gonna run through all the lineup, but we're also going to go into some geeky rum history and some other bits and pieces about rum. I know some of you might be. Give me a show of hands. Who here is new to the rum category? Who's sort of just dipping their toe in the rum world a little bit?
Oh, come on, Harmony.
Couple of you guys who
Don't
hear
drink
the
it
rum.
enough to feel like an expert or enough to try something and know what region it might come from or distillery. So I feel like for nerds and like
Yeah.
passionate rum people, that's a new thing.
I, I feel like I have Jamaican rums down. There's like a note in
Oh,
them, but
okay.
that's probably the only one that I could pick out blind. Maybe Demerara. But anyway,
Nice. So, well, wherever you are in your lineup, if you're a rum nerd and you want all the geeky details, or you're just starting out, I'm going to try and give you all something to take away from tonight. And yeah, use the chat, ask any questions you've got throughout the session. We can go on as many tangents as you like. It's 3 a.m. here in France, so if we're up here, we're already starting late. Why not? We'll just push on through. So, um, I am going to pull up some slides for you guys. So you got some pretty pictures as well. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah, perfect. All right, let's pull this up. See if that goes any bigger. Ba, 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 ba. All right. You guys can see that okay? Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's get stuck in. So just to give you some background on me, where I came from. So I used to work in this bar in London, this bar called Trailer Happiness, which is in Notting Hill in London. It's been running for about 25 years now, and it is one of the world's institutions when it comes to rum. If ever you're visiting London, make sure you go there, go and see Sly and all the team. It's one of the homes of rum, especially in the UK. And about 15 years ago, this is where I did my first ever bar shifts. And the back bar here had about 300, 350 rums on the back bar. And at that time, I didn't know that there were that many rums or that you could have that many different styles or brands and countries and places I'd never heard of. And when I started working there, it kind of really opened up my eyes to the world of rum because so many times we go to a shop or a bar and they might have, 100 different whiskeys, 50 different gins, 20 vodkas, and then five really crappy rums in the corner, right? And the trouble with that is those if those five rums were like the five best rums money could buy, and they're like, we're just going to have a small rum section, but they're going to be amazing, then fair enough. But they never are. They're always like the five cheapest, nastiest rum and coke rums, things that you wouldn't, things you could buy in the supermarket, not things you'd want to drink by themselves. And if those are the only rums you're ever exposed to, of course you're not going to be a rum drinker, right? Like you've got these amazing single malts, these amazing whiskies that, for year and year and year are outdoing themselves to be the best of the best of the best. If you only have really bad rum, why would you become a rum drinker? We have to offer you something of the level of the same quality of what you have in other spirits. And rum has it, and rum has lots of it, but most people don't know what to look for or don't have access to it. A lot of shops think people aren't interested in rum, so they only have one little section for rum and then entire walls for their whiskey and other spirits. And it's like, well, if you had good rum, you'd probably become a rum drinker too. And this is what this bar did for me. So 15 years ago in Trailer Happiness, we used to do fun things like, obviously it was a tiki bar, so we had all these rum cocktails coming out, 20 different garnishes, half the drinks were on fire. Um, that roof you see along the top was a copper roof. And so if we needed to get people excited and going on a Friday night, we'd grab a bottle of Ray and Nephew, so 63% overproof Jamaican rum. We'd give ourselves a layback. We'd pour some rum on our hand, light our hand on fire, and then breathe out an 8-meter fireball of Ray and Nephew across the copper roof. And all the flames would be hitting the copper and going green and blue, and everyone's jumping up like, what the hell is going on? And the whole thing was completely illegal, right? But it was this fun side to rum, which you don't see that in other spirits, right? You don't go to a whiskey bar and see someone in their waistcoat and they're like, "Excuse me, sir, I'm just going to breathe out some cask strength whiskey across the room," right? Like there's this fun, adventurous, dangerous side to rum, and that's a blessing and a curse because, rum, we have the fire, we have the fashion, we have this fun side to rum. But because of that, a lot of people think of it just as the holiday drink or their island drink, and they don't treat it as seriously as they would a whiskey or a cognac and other things. So sometimes this perception problem we have with rum can also mean people don't look into it as closely as they could. My goal tonight, my hope tonight is that all of you go away with this, at the very least, asking a lot more questions about rum and looking a little bit closer into the category. And wherever you are, hopefully we nudge you up the ladder a little bit more after tonight. So let's dig into it. We are tasting a lot of different blends today. Okay, everything from Black Tot is a blend, and it's a blend not in the sense of a blend that you would think of from, say, the whiskey world, where if I say, oh, I've got a blend, you go, oh, okay, it's a blend of, yeah, pot and column from what, a grain and a malt, but it'll be all from one region or one country. In rum, when we talk about blends, we can blend multiple countries together. So we're talking Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, all these different places coming together. And that's very unique. That doesn't exist in any other spirit category. In whiskey, that would be like me saying, I've blended some bourbon with some Scotch, with some Irish, with some Japanese. And you'd be like, what the hell are you doing? You're not allowed. Well, like, stop doing that, There have been a couple of world whiskey blends in the last few years, but they're more like new gimmicks and ideas rather than like centuries old traditions. But rum has this. Rum has been doing this for over 200 years. And part of why all that started was back in the days of old wooden sailing ships going around. So when we go back to this kind of time, uh, this painting was done in early 1700s. This is the River Thames in London. And you can see this era is chaos. There's not much organization here. All the ships are coming in. This is at the peak of colonialization happening around the Caribbean and the Americas.
Hey, Mitch, where did they get the drone to do the painting from back in this era? Because
Uh,
I love the angle.
yeah, this is DJI. They go back a long way if you look back into them. So anyway, so wooden sailing ships coming into the River Thames. They're bringing back everything that they've brought back from the Caribbean. So the sugar, the spices, rum, all of these different uh, substances and produce that they're colonizing and bringing back. Now, they had an issue at this time because as you can see, it looks like chaos. It would take about 12 weeks to offload your ship from time to time. And if you're waiting 12 weeks to offload your cargo and you've got some very expensive, very precious cargo, including some cargo which is consumable and some cargo which can go off or perish over time if it's fresh fruit like pineapples, which were worth, several £1,000s back in the day for one single pineapple. You needed to get your cargo off quickly. If you're running your crew with a skeleton crew and they're there for 12 weeks, you can imagine how much rum gets drunk, how much of your goods get sold overboard and goes missing. So they had a problem which they needed to fix. Now, when they did this, they built the West India docks. So a bunch of the merchants got together in the early 1800s. They came together with this plan to fund and build the West India docks. And the idea was to completely revolutionize the import-export system in London. And it did. It's part of what made the British Empire as powerful as it was at this time, was in part because they got this system done so well. And what it did, rather than one boat coming in or one ship coming in one at a time, it allowed them to offload multiple ships, 12 ships at a time in all these different warehouses, turn them around, and they had one batch of warehouses for goods that were being imported, turn the ships around, load them back up with goods to be exported, and then send them back out the River Thames. Why is this important to our story? Well, a couple of things. There was a lot of rum going back and forth on these ships, and they had separate warehouses dedicated to rum blending. They kept the rum separate because if the rum ever caught fire, it would blow up the rest of the warehouses. And this actually happened to the London warehouses in the World War II and during the Blitz. The rum warehouses got bombed, and Churchill actually ordered a media blackout on it. He said, we don't tell anyone that the rum's gone, because if they know the rum's gone, there'll be a huge loss of morale in the troops. So these rum warehouses, and here in the West India docks, this is where a lot of the single cask rums were being brought back from the Caribbean. And just a little way down the river, you had the Royal Navy warehouses where these guys were getting their rum. Now, talking about rum and the Caribbean and rum at sea and Navy rum and this whole idea, it can seem like a bit of a crazy idea when we're looking at it through a modern landscape, right? So in 2026, the idea of giving rum to sailors every day would seem like a crazy, crazy thing to do. But if we go back to those wooden sailing ships back in the first formation of the Navy in the 1500s, in the 1600s, water wasn't safe. If you could get clean drinking water, first of all, you were doing well. But if you were going to sea for weeks and weeks at a time, you didn't have, nice glass bottles to transport everything in. Glass was too expensive. You didn't have plastic or steel containers. The only thing you had were wooden barrels. And so if you put water in a wooden barrel, sure, the barrel will hold it, but after 2-3 days, that water starts to stagnate. It starts to grow little algae, go green. It starts to turn into pond life. And if you're going to sea for weeks at a time, you can't drink that after the first few days. So then they had a problem. Do you keep stopping at ports and restocking on your water every couple of days? What if you can't? What if the ocean's too big? So they needed something that lasted longer than water. And for some reason, they didn't know why, but beer lasted longer than the water. Wine lasted longer than beer, and spirits seemed to last forever, and it tasted better on the other side. So that was a win-win. Now, every navy around the world would put whatever spirits or whatever booze that they made on board of their Navy ships. So for the British, 1500s, 1600s, whiskey isn't even really on the scene at this stage. Gin, maybe a little bit, but it's too expensive. Maybe the captain has a bottle, but not for the whole crew. The main thing we made in England was beer. So we put beer on the ships. And it would be a very light ABV beer, right? Like very, very low, much lower than today's standards, maybe one, like 2%, 3% maybe. If they were going on a longer voyage, maybe a higher ABV beer because the higher ABV would last a bit longer. But that was what we were putting on the ships. We loved brandy, but we hated the Spanish and the French. So if we could steal it off them, we would get it. But otherwise, beer was what we were drinking. And then every navy would do the same thing. So the Spanish would take sherry and brandy and wine. The Dutch could take Genever and beer. The French could take everything, right? Cognac, Armagnac, Calvados, Champagne, all of the wine. They had the best back bar in the fleet, and that's why we won all those battles. So when all of these colonial powers start going to the Caribbean and the Americas, the question becomes, what do we drink on the way back? And rum becomes the answer. So for the British, where we didn't have a spirit in those very early days, we didn't have a spirit that we kind of called our own, other than maybe gin, yes, okay. But rum became this very exotic, very premium, very high-end liquid that was made from sugarcane and sugar, which was worth its weight in gold back in the day. You know, sugar was considered a luxury item. So to have a spirit that could only be made from this luxury item was considered very, very high end. Whiskey was considered much more the local cheap stuff, and rum was the high end one. And over the last 100 years, that perception has really changed, right? But in those early days, rum was considered something quite exotic. And these guys were drinking rum every single day. So as you see, there's a couple of things on this picture I'll point out to you, and we'll knock through some pictures so we can get on to your first rum. Now, the guy third in, he's holding a wicker jar. This is a flagon of Navy rum. This is important to our story. The guy in the middle with the black book, he's the purser or the pusser. So he's responsible for noting down who gets their rum and who doesn't every day, because rum is considered part of your payment as a sailor. So you could choose to take the money or the rum, and everyone took the rum because rum was worth something on board. Rum was its own currency on board. Whereas if you took money, one, you only got paid once every 3 months as a sailor. And two, what are you going to do with money on the ship? You know, it's like, okay, a few coins for this or that. But if you have a tot of rum, this I can switch with the chef and I can get more food, or I can give it to someone and get some cigarettes, or I can give it to someone and they'll cover my shift and I can get more shore leave. So rum was its own currency on board. And every day, these sailors would come together, they'd come and get their tots. So they'd get it out of this big tub called a grog tub. This is a bit of a rowdy crew. This is not what it's meant to look like. This is what it's meant to look like. Okay. So this is them before daiquiris. This is them after daiquiris. But what they would be doing, they'd be lining up, and you'll see each sailor here has a bucket, and this was called a fanny. And the fanny would be not just for them. You would choose one person in your mess deck, one person in your little section on the ship, and you would nominate them to go and collect the rum. And if they came back short, then you beat them up. So you can see they're all looking to make sure they get exactly the right amount of rum, because if they come back short, they're in trouble. The purser's on the side reading out each amount for each. So he's got notes on, if you misbehaved, you lost your rum ration for the day. So he's calling out how much rum for every sailor. The guy's dishing it out to them. And this happened on ships all around the world. And you'd see on the grog tubs, these big wooden open top tubs, the King, God bless him, or after 1953, the Queen, God bless her. And this is Queen Elizabeth coming to get her tot. So you can see how much of a part of English tradition this was, where even kings and queens were coming to get their rum ration, they would serve the Navy rum at royal state weddings and royal state occasions because it was considered the best spirit that we had to hand. Now, this happened for a good couple of 100 years. So they started the rum ration. For the first recorded time of it being issued was 1655, just after we'd won Jamaica from the Spanish. So 1655, to celebrate, we gave everyone a tot of rum. They officially started the ration in 1731 when they wrote the first ever Navy Code of Conduct. And in 1731, they said every single sailor gets either half a pint of overproof spirits or 8 pints of beer per day. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to sail a ship after drinking half a pint of overproof, but it's a pretty wild time, right? So everyone starts fighting, they're throwing each other overboard. So over time, they halve the half a pint to a quarter of a pint and then to an eighth of a pint. And an eighth of a pint was about 72 mils, okay? 2 and a bit ounces if there's any Americans kicking around, but 72 mils for anyone on metric, okay? Or half a gill back in the day was the old imperial measurement for it. You would get that tot of rum every morning at 11 a.m. They considered this responsible day drinking, okay? Because if you drank at night and it was dark and you fell overboard, no one's going to find you. Whereas at 11 a.m., you can have it with your morning meal, you work it off during the day, you're feeling good, the morale's high, and that was considered a good way to motivate the crew. Now, 1740 comes along, you have a new admiral on the fleet. And the admiral's called Edward Vernon. He's famous because he had the world's first ever waterproof coat. It's called a Grogham coat. And all the sailors who have nicknames for everyone call him Old Grog because of the coat. And when he becomes the admiral, he says, you guys are getting too wasted. We're going to water down the rum a little bit. And the sailors go, fucking grog. And grog becomes this term for the watered down rum ration that they serve every day. And if you've ever had too many rums and you've woken up the next day and you felt a bit groggy, that's where that term comes from 1740, from the sailors drinking too much rum and becoming rum rats on the ship. Now, they kept on this tradition for another couple of 100 years, basically, until 1970. They finally said, maybe we shouldn't give rum to the sailors anymore, okay? Now, in 1970, now this was Britain in 1970. To give you context, in 1958, we invented nuclear submarines. And for 12 years, we said, should we still give rum to the guys on the nuclear submarines every morning? For 12 years, we said, yes, absolutely. Rule Britannia, let's go. So 31st of July 1970, they gave out the last tots of rum to all the British Navy. The sailors all wore black armbands. They had a funeral for the rum. They tipped some rum out at sea and they called it Black Tot Day. So it was the death of the rum tot. Now, by that time, all of the different navies of the Commonwealth were doing their own orders, their own issues. So the Canadian Navy carried on for another 2 years. And they actually finished on the 31st of March, 1972. So we are celebrating what is it now? The 54th anniversary for Canadian Black Tot Day today. And so if you've got your first rum, your little Black Tot Finest Caribbean, we'll raise a little glass to them. So well done to you guys for carrying on for another 2 years. Big respect to that. The winners, however, we should note, was actually the New Zealand Navy, because the New Zealand Navy carried on until the 28th of February, 1990. So another 20 years past everyone else. I'm guessing there wasn't a lot of nuclear submarine warfare happening around New Zealand at the time, so they got their top for a while longer.
Well, I mean, seems fair. They were a long ways from everything. So
Exactly.
so
They needed some more rum.
Mitch, I mean, we want to dive into the rums, but I do have one question. Did the officers get a different allotment of rum, and were they drinking the rum, or were they being posh and drinking other stuff in the officers' mess?
Yeah, it seems to have changed over time, and the offers probably had a lot more leeway, certainly to choose what they could and couldn't do. In the early days, the rule was when when Edward Vernon introduced the grog, the watered down rum ration, that was more for the junior rates and for the younger crew members. The officers were allowed to have their rum neat. So they got their rum still the same ration, but they got theirs undiluted, whereas the
Oh,
younger officers had to have it diluted down. At some point later on, they decided, okay, maybe the officers shouldn't have any spirits at all, and so they took the officers' ration away entirely, and it was just uh, the the lower down officers that got everything else. So the rum carried on till 1970, but yeah, for the top officers, it initially neat and then not at all later on.
but don't feel bad for them because they were probably drinking claret and port and
Yeah,
all other kinds of stuff. So,
they
yeah,
had the nice cabins. I'm sure they
yeah,
got away with lots of stuff. So
absolutely. All right, Mitch, Black Tot, Finest Caribbean, the starter rum, the rum that I always have on my bar. I like to make all kinds of cocktails with it, but it's a lovely rum all on its own. Tell us about the Finest Caribbean.
absolutely. So let me pull this up for you. Oh, did you get that? Is that displaying?
Yep.
Yeah. So Black Top Finest Caribbean. So we've got it up here. Now, this is a blend, as I say. So we've got Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, and Trinidad going on in here. We've got a 5-year-old Barbados coming from the Foursquare Distillery, 3-year-old Jamaica coming from Worthy Park, 2 to 4-year-old Trinidad coming from Trinidad Distillers, and some 0 to 5 year from Guyana from the Demerara Distillers there. Um, to give you an idea of what we're trying to do here, when we blend, each country will have its own flavor profile. Each distillery will have its own flavor profile. And they'll have some signature notes, as you know from whiskey, as you know from any spirit that you taste. You'll always have that signature fingerprint from somewhere which tells you, this is unmistakably this place, this person, this distillery that's making it. And the freedom we have in rum is that we can blend all these different flavors together. Now, I told you this was to do with the Navy, but I didn't tell you why. Part of the reason why we're allowed to blend all these different rums together is the Navy had a problem when they started issuing the rum top. And the problem was that they drank so much rum every year that they couldn't buy all of it from just one location. So the Navy were drinking at their peak about 18 million liters of rum per year. Now, a modern day distillery in 2026 would make maybe 5 million, maybe 10 million liters of pure alcohol if it was a real workhorse distillery. Back in the 1800s, 18 million liters was impossible for any distillery to think of. So you couldn't buy all of your rum for the fleet from one distillery. Most of the time, you couldn't all buy it all from one country. So if you can't buy it all from one place, what do you do? Well, the Navy set up this blending system where they built 50 different blending vats, connected them all up with pipes a third of the way up, open top wooden vats that they could top up with rum. And over time, all of the vats would blend together. And so they created this kind of perpetual blend or infinity blend in the very early 1800s, around 1804. And they just kept topping it up for the next 160 years. Now, unintentionally, they became the world's first ever rum blenders. What they didn't realize, or what they realized over time, was that every country was bringing its own flavor. And if you adjusted those blends, you would get different flavor profiles, which the sailors would either prefer or not prefer, depending on what you added. So what we've tried to show you visually on this screen is this is what we're trying to build. We're trying to take all these flavors from these countries, these quintessential notes that we get from each of these places, and put them all together in a bottle. We don't want something singular. We don't want something one layered or one dimensional. We want something that's got layers and layers and layers to it. So hopefully you get some of these notes in your rum, and hopefully you see it's, if you're not a rum drinker yet, hopefully it shows you like, there can be a lot of complexity to rum. It's not all simple, sweet, light stuff.
Mitch, one of the guys in the chat brought up, is this the new blend we're trying or the old one? And I would have to guess based on the flavor profile that this tastes like the new formulation as opposed to the old one. When did you make that switch over? Because before it used to be, I think, a lot more Guyana, like it was quite a bit heavier presence of that in the rum.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not actually sure which one you guys are on. Do you know if it has a black label on front like this or an orange label like what's on the
I'm
screen?
pretty sure it's orange. Harmony?
It's the new batch.
Yeah,
The new
because I mean
batch.
this also tastes more like what you've shown us here,
Mhm.
and it tastes a little different from the previous one. So to me, it makes sense that this is the new batch that we've got in
Yeah.
front, the new formulation that we have in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So the addition we made was the Trinidad. So previously it never had Trinidad rum in the blend. And the original batch was about 60% Guyana, 35% Barbados, and 5% Jamaica. The
Mhm.
distillery stayed the same, but we didn't have the Trinidad in there. And when Ollie first made the original one, which was with the black label on front and the orange on the side, he'd never blended a rum before. This was his first ever rum blend that he ever made. And I found it really interesting because when I started with Black Tot, I was kind of like, what were you trying to make? Were you trying to make a Mai Tai rum? Were you trying to make this style of rum? Were you like, what did you have in mind? And he said, I'm a whiskey drinker. I just made a rum that I would like to drink as a whiskey drinker. And I was like, that's why it's so different. That's why it's so unusual, because you've come at this completely as a whiskey blender. For those of you who don't know, we're our parent company, if you like. We're an independent called Elixir Distillers. We were founded by Sukhinder Singh, who started up the Whiskey Exchange in the UK. And we have some whiskey brands like Port Asquet, Elements of Islay, Single Malts of Scotland. So if you are a whiskey lover, you may have come across some of our whiskies. And the same blender, Ollie Chilton, who picks all the casks for those, um, is does all of our rum as well. So he's coming very much from that whiskey mindset. This blend happened 5 years later. So after 5 years of working with rum and doing all these different master blenders that we're about to try, Ollie had this sort of chance to go back to Finest Caribbean and go, what would I change if I was going to do it again now? And now with 5 years more rum blending experience under his belt, this was his reformulation.
Mhm.
And for me, this is a more rummy rum. This tastes more how I kind of would think someone creating a rum blend with these countries would try to create. And it works for me in even more rum cocktails than the old one did. The old one was very good if you wanted like rum old fashions or heavier stirred down rum drinks, like very booze forward rum drinks.
Yeah.
This one works in everything. It does those too, but it works in brighter drinks like daiquiris and all sorts of things, which I'll show you now. So if you want any other recommendations of how to use this, one thing I will say, if you're coming from the whiskey world to the rum world, is sometimes there's a real taboo around mixing anything which you consider, too good to drink on its own. You go, well, I like drinking on its own. I should never mix this. And in whiskey, that is very much a thing. Rum doesn't. We don't mind so much. If you want to mix it, mix it. If you want to drink it neat, drink it neat. My thing for rum is that sometimes people think, oh, I'm making a cocktail, so I'll just buy the cheapest stuff I can find. That to me is crazy. It's like if you're going to make a drink for someone, that you care. It's like if you were cooking for someone you care about and you say, "Hey, I went and bought the cheapest ingredients and the cheapest meat and fish I could find." You're like, "Oh, I I'm good. I've already eaten. Sorry." You know, it wouldn't taste good, right? You're already fighting against the fact that you're using the worst possible ingredients. Why would you do that in a cocktail? Like if you use a better ingredient, of course the drink's going to taste better. So for me and most rum people, we have very much that mindset. Use a better rum, you'll get a better drink. Yes, there is a point at which that, you probably do want to just drink it neat. But with this kind of rum, this one should be able to go either way. Hopefully it tastes great by itself, but if you want to mix it, it makes a great daiquiri like the recipe here. Uh, Even things like a mojito, like simple things, simple drinks where people might use a really light or cheaper rum, use a better rum. It's going to taste better, especially by the time you've added the soda and the juice and the syrup. And I mean, I'd throw the soda away and just top it with champagne. If you're going to top it with anything, champagne makes everything better. So, um, even things like a pina colada, if you have a pina colada, you could use a really light rum, or if you use something like this, you're going to get so much more body and flavor, and it's going to really kick through really nicely. So, lots of different options that you can do
Mhm.
with your rum. And as I say, for me, Finest Caribbean is a really good workhorse rum. You can sip it neat, but also you can throw it in a load of drinks as well.
Mhm. Interesting. Well, I think yeah, it seems more versatile now. It's interesting though when you say like what Ollie was initially going for, and I think that's why I loved that original one so much, and why I love the Master Blenders Reserve so much. But what's interesting is, despite the fact it's changed, I mean, I think the biggest change is there's less rum from Guyana in it. But the one
Mhm.
thing that is interesting is that the new formulation has less unaged rum in it. Like it's got a much smaller, the old one had, I think, 20%, and now the new
Correct.
one's down to 10.
Yep.
So it is using some lighter components, but it's also using less of that like unaged spirit, rum spirit. I guess rum is just unaged rum. Rum doesn't have to have an age. So sorry, coming from a whiskey world, I'm thinking, you know,
Yeah.
X years.
Yeah. No. And you're right. Depending on the country, some countries do have a minimum age statement for rum, to be called rum, similar to Scotch, say, and some countries don't at all. Most countries don't at all, but there's a handful that do. So.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, this is part of what makes rum so confusing, like I think in the whiskey world, if you've learnt the major three or four countries, and then a lot of the others might copy the rules off Scotch or one of the others, you kind of have a good template for what the rules are that everyone's going to be following roughly. In the rum world, there's about 54 different countries that make rum. They all do different things. They all have different traditions. They all have different styles and flavors and palettes that they're going for. And because of that, it can seem like a real mountain to climb and start picking apart which each one does. But that's also part of what makes rum really fun to start exploring as well.
What I like most about this new rendition of Finest Caribbean is it tastes more like a rum and you get more coconut that I didn't get before. And so for me, as also a whiskey drinker, when I make that transition from whiskey to rum, it feels like a rum, like I'm actually cheating on whiskey. Whereas with the other one, as much as I liked it, I would finish that first glass of the Finest Caribbean and go like, now I'll switch to Scotch, where I'm just content having a rum. Yeah.
No,
I like the
absolutely.
coconut notes to it, and it's not too much, but I know it's there and it feels very tropical.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm.
So, Rich, Mitch, how does this lead us into the historic Solera then? Are we talking, is the basis for that the old recipe, or is it the new recipe for Black Tot?
It is indeed, yeah. So the old recipe for Finest Caribbean is what we actually use for historic Solera. So let me bring that up for you now. Ba, 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 ba. So for historic Solera, and we'll get this in your glasses so that we can start enjoying this as well. Um, so historic Solera uses the original blend for Finest Caribbean, which is the higher Guyana percentage. This is our Solera system as well. This is a rare thing to see sometimes. A lot of people talk about Soleras, but then don't actually show you their Soleras, and sometimes the Soleras don't exist. So it's always important to actually know what the Solera is and where this is coming from, and if it's a Solera vat or if it's a proper Solera system or what's going on with it. So this is our Solera system. It's 46 casks up at which we have up at our warehouse at the Tormore Distillery in Speyside, which is owned by Elixir Distillers for the last 3 years. So we have all of our rum for Black Tot warehoused at warehouse number 2 up at Tormore. And each one of these casks that you see is an 800-litre former Oloroso cask. So if you think of a bourbon cask is usually 200 litres, this is 800, so 4 times the capacity. Each one of these racks you see is designed to hold 2 bourbon casks. So that gives you an idea of the scale and the size of these casks.
Mhm.
We have our Solera set up in 3 tiers. So the Solera layer is on the bottom. That means the floor or the foundation. Then C1, Criadera 1, layer 1. C2, Criadera 2, layer 2. You could have 3, 4, 5, depending on how many layers you want. And I'll show you a bit about how the Solera system works in a little bit. This is our blend for the historic Solera. So this is the rum that's going in initially. As I say, for those of you who remember the old Black Label Black Tot, this is the same recipe for that. This is what we put into our sherry casks 5 years ago when we started working on Black Tot Historic Solera. We take that blend and we put that first into Oloroso and PX casks for 2 years. So that's just that 2 years initially is just to soak up as much sherry flavor as possible before the rum gets into the Solera system. Why don't we just put the blend straight into the Solera? Because after a few passes down the Solera, you would lose all of the sherry flavor. You need a way of reintroducing sherry into the Solera system each time. And the way we do that is with the 2 years in static aging first in this Oloroso and PX, and then that gets blended together and goes into the top of the Solera. How does Solera work? Well, you fill up all the casks, and then when you're ready at a certain point, you'll take out a half or a third from the bottom layer first, and that's what gets blended and bottled into Black Tot Historic Solera. Then you take out some rum from the first Criadera, that goes into the Solera layer. Then rum from the second Criadera goes into the first, and then the new rum goes in at the top. So the idea is that over the years, building it up, building it up, building it up, older and older rum ends up in the bottom tier in the Solera. You're never fully emptying any of the casks, and so all of them have older liquid building up over the years. And then as the new liquid comes in, that newer, more vibrant liquid is kind of blending with some of the older flavors that have developed over time. And you end up creating this kind of mother broth of rum, which is unique to your Solera. And those flavors have just developed and developed and developed over time. Soleras sometimes become a bit of a dirty word in the rum world because you sometimes see some funny age statements.
Yeah.
And you sometimes see a lot of sugar added, or it's a very light style rum. So we wanted to make a rum that's, very complex, very shows off those sherry flavors, and is something a little bit more developed. What do you guys think? Do you like it?
Yeah. I mean, I think this to me, well, I'm a bit biased because I think I like that heavier, darker profile of that older recipe.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I like the Solera. I like the sherry introduction to it. I was worried I wouldn't be a fan of it, because I was worried it would mask the things that made it taste like rum. But I think it does work well, and it makes sense that you're going with that heavier, darker recipe as well, because if you're going to add these other flavors in, you need a profile of rum that's going to stand up to that as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing to consider when you're looking at Solera rums, and if you've tried any other Solera rums or you want to do like side by sides, Solera typically, it comes from the sherry world, right? It comes from Jerez. It's a Spanish origin. So the main rum countries where you see Soleras pop up are places like Venezuela, Guatemala, where typically they'll do a much lighter style of rum going into the Solera system. Here we're blending Jamaica rum, Guyana rum, these big, heavy flavors, and those flavors interact very differently with the sherry and change in a whole different way over time. So it's quite interesting to see the different flavors you'll get just by starting with a different base ingredient. And yes, Brennan, you mentioned that this would be good in a fridge Negroni. You're right. So the flavors you get here, the figs, the plums, the chocolates. We designed this to be a sipping rum by itself, but every bartender I gave it to was like, "What about a Manhattan?" And then we ended up having a load of Manhattans in bars with it, and it's delicious in that. And you can do little twists like a classic Manhattan or a Palmetto, as we'd call it with rum normally, or with like little black cherry chocolate twists, which make it very nice as well. Things like an old fashioned work very well with this. And again, you can do twists with that. But one of my favorite drinks to have with Black Tot, whether it's the finest or whether you want more of the sherry from the Solera system as well, but is just to do a rum Negroni, or what we'd call a right hand, which is 40 mils rum, 20 mils Campari, 20 mils sweet vermouth, red vermouth. Uh, and if you buy the right type of fridge that has the little water dispenser in the middle, but it isn't plumbed into the wall, you can basically set yourself up with about a three
Oh,
and a half
yeah.
liter, 3.5 liter tank of rum Negroni just ready to dispense at any dinner party you host. So I highly recommend that move.
I, I don't know if Brennan's new wife would let him get away with that, but I hope she would because it's a great idea. Mitch, I
Well,
was going to throw
tell
out
her I said
there,
it was okay.
you said it was okay, so then it's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
Most
Um,
people blame me for their bad decisions, so it's one more, won't hurt.
It's funny you mentioned like the right hand because I got introduced to that cocktail from the old Black Tot website because you'd have cocktails on there. And I remember they were classified by like basically boozier cocktails. And naturally I clicked on that because that's kind of my jam. But I love the right hand. The other one that I really liked making, that I've been making recently with the new Black Tot is the last word. I find like I like mixing that with chartreuse. I just think it works really well. And not realizing it, the old rum probably would have been too much to mix with chartreuse. Like it might have been a little bit too dark and a little too bold.
But probably depends on the chartreuse. I think sometimes like a yellow chartreuse could work really well with it, a little lighter style.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I find chartreuse and its many variants can be, they often have some of them like heavier flavors, some of them like lighter flavors, and yeah, you definitely have to play around with them a little bit to find the right
Mhm.
pairing sometimes.
Cool.
So we've got a few more rums to go through, but I know some of you are sort of new into rum, and I want to give you a little bit of a crash course in where rum's coming from, just so you have the basic 101 parts as well. And we'll throw in some geeky stuff as well for the geeks that are here. So let's just quickly run through some of the basics that you need to know about rum. Okay, so first of all rum, no matter where it's made in the world, is all coming from sugarcane. Okay. Now, what form of that sugarcane turns into the rum, we're going to look at next, but the raw material, the base starting point must be cane. From there, we crush the cane, we get the juice. Now, if you just crush the cane and get the juice, you can get rum. The outside of the cane is covered in yeast. So when you crush it, that yeast gets crushed into that sugar juice, And after a few hours in the Caribbean sun, it will spontaneously start to ferment. It wants to turn into rum. It's like, make me into a daiquiri. That's its goal in life. Okay. So if you ferment the juice, distill the juice, that will give you agricole or clarin or cachaça or Batavia rack. These are our cane juice-based rums, okay? But if we want to make sugar, we have to do a few extra steps. So then we boil the juice, it turns into a cane syrup. We can also add yeast, ferment, and distill the cane syrup. That becomes our Ronzacapas, our Diplomaticos. Rums like this are made from cane syrup. But again, if we want to make sugar crystals, we do an extra step. So we pressurize the syrup, we cause these sugar crystals to form, we spin it in a centrifuge really fast, separate out the sugarcane crystals on one side, and we're left with this black, tarry, heavy stuff called molasses on the other side. And then if you add yeast, ferment, and distill that, then you get rums like what you're trying tonight. So these are all molasses-based rums that we're having here. You can make rum from the juice, from the syrup, from the molasses, or from the juice and the molasses, or the syrup and the molasses, or the syrup and the juice. So you can combine these different raw materials together. But the main thing is it all starts with sugarcane. So let me just show you quickly what it looks like. Sometimes I think it's easier to see it. So you harvest your cane, you crush your cane. Typically now it's mostly mechanical, unless it's really up on a hill or somewhere hard to get to, then you'll still get some places that will do it by hand. You'll get these big cane trucks causing traffic jams all around the Caribbean. You won't be moving anywhere fast if you see one of these. Then you crush your cane, you get your cane juice. These rollers, these are sugarcane press rollers, but if you're a tequila lover, you may have seen them in the tequila world because they also now use them to crush a lot of piñas, and because they're good at crushing hard, fibrous things like sugarcane, they're also good for crushing agave. So you'll often see them talk about sugarcane presses if you're a tequila or less so mezcal, but certainly if you're a tequila drinker. Then you boil the juice down. This is the old way of doing it, literally ladling it from pan to pan, reducing the juice down until it becomes a cane syrup. Then you put it in these vacuum pans. This slide he's holding in the middle, this is the first formation you ever get when you pressurize cane syrup and you get these crystals to form. This is this mix we call mesquite. And this mesquite is sugarcane crystals and the syrup all together before we've centrifuged it, before we've spun it out. And what he's looking at in the microscope there is actually each formation of the sugar crystals. So you may have heard that you can do this about 3 times. When you pressurize it, the crystals form, they cause these what we call strike A sugar. You spin it in the centrifuge, separate out those big chunky crystals, and you get strike A molasses. Strike A molasses, sometimes you'll hear in America people call it fancy molasses. This just means it's got a higher sugar content because we haven't extracted all the sugar that we can from that molasses yet. Then if you want to keep going, you pressurize it again, more crystals form, but they're a bit smaller this time, and you know, some smaller ones in there. Separate out those, strike B sugar, strike B molasses, do it one more time. Now you see the strike C is tiny little crystals. So that by the time you separate those out, there is so little sugar left in the molasses that it's not worth doing this process again. So then what do we do with this molasses that still has some sugar in it, but not enough to be worth extracting sugar crystals? Well, we can eat it, we can sell it in health food shops, or we can do the proper thing and turn it into rum, right? So this molasses becomes our base material for a lot of the rums that we're trying today. This is molasses. This is a very sexy pick of molasses. Then you ferment your molasses or your juice or your syrup, whatever you're working with. In the rum world, you'll often see open fermentations like this. This is a very common thing in the rum world to see in certain places. Sometimes you'll see really good looking things like this, this is a dunder tank in Jamaica. So dunder is, if you're a whiskey drinker, dunder is stillage. Okay, dunder is the leftover wash after you've distilled all the alcohol out. The leftover wash is called dunder. Now, that dunder doesn't have any alcohol in it anymore, but it's very acidic and it has a lot of dead yeast in it, and it has certain components which, if you keep collecting it over the years and years and years, will give you flavor of a sort. This tank is like a bacteria soup of flavor that if you add a little bit to it to your next fermenting molasses, it's going to kickstart that fermentation, and it's going to introduce decades of flavor that have been built up in the space of a few days, which you couldn't do if you were doing a purely fresh fermentation. They also have things like cane acid vats. So this is in Hampton Estate in Jamaica. You can see, so this is cane juice that's been allowed to turn to vinegar. They've got bits of cane stalk in there. They've got some crocodiles in there. They've got all these different pieces going on. So those crocodile-looking things are actually jackfruits. So the goal with this is to make the most acidic liquid possible. Why would they want the most acidic liquid possible? Why is acid so important? In rum and in all spirits, but in rum we talk about it more, we have this thing called esters. So if you've ever heard of esters, or if you haven't, esters are a lot simpler than rum geeks will sometimes make them out to be, okay? To put it very simply, esters are the fruit smells in your spirits. So when you smell something and you go, ah, banana, pineapple, coconut, mint, strawberry, chocolate, any of these flavors that you're getting, grapefruit, whatever it is, you are these are esters. These are, and unless they're a flavoring that's been added, if they're naturally occurring, these are esters that have been created during the fermentation, distillation process, and you are smelling them and interpreting them as different fruits and smells and different flavors. How do you make an ester? When an acid molecule and an alcohol molecule love each other very much, they come together and they make a little ester baby, okay? So depending on the type of acid and the type of alcohol, they will come together and make all different types of ester babies. What do the ester babies look like? They look like this. So these are all the different types of alcohol along the top. These are all the different type of carboxylic acids down the bottom. Now, when they combine, these are all the ester babies that you're seeing in the middle. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing, if it's not already. So to make these flavors, you need these different types of alcohol. Why is fermentation so important in your spirits? Not just rum, I'm talking about whiskey, cognac, whatever you like drinking. Why is the fermentation stage so important? Why does a longer fermentation seem to give you bigger, better flavors than a shorter fermentation will? Because you're giving more time for some of these chemical reactions, some of these flavors to form. Now, if we look at it from just from the alcohol line on the top, after distillation, the only alcohol you want to end up with is ethanol, right? Or ethyl on this column. So that means that after distillation, if you've distilled successfully and you've only got ethanol in there and it's only the one that you want, the only flavors that you can actually make ester-wise are the ones in that ethanol column, if you were mixing it with all these different acids after distillation. But before distillation, you might have methanol, all these different types of alcohol along the top. You could potentially have lots of these different types of alcohol in small forms, which would be very dangerous to drink. But in the fermentation stage, before they've all been separated, they're all mixing together and they're creating all these delicious new smells and flavors and all these different things. The longer you let something ferment for, the more chance you have for all these different flavors to be introduced. If you introduce something like dunder, which has decades of different carboxylic acids that have been building up, you can now introduce some really complex, crazy flavors into your fermentation and cause more of these esters to form. If you've got anything that you're introducing that's from decades of this mother broth, you're going to create more flavor. So This is something that rum nerds will geek out about. You'll sometimes hear them talk about the number of esters. Like this rum has 200 esters. They're not saying it has 200 different types of ester. They're measuring one type of ester, the one in the top left that looks like PVA glue, the ethyl ethanoate or ethyl acetate. They measure that one ester. Why? Because that one is always there. Because you're always going to have ethanol. And if you have any acidity at all, you're going to have ethanoate, which is just the fancy name for vinegar. Okay. So ethanol and vinegar, you're going to have it in some degree. A longer fermentation will have a higher number of this. So when you hear 200 esters, 1,000 esters, what they're really saying is that it's got 1,000 grams of ethyl ethanoate per hectoliter of absolute alcohol. What the hell does that mean? It means if you had 100 liters of this rum and it was at 100% ABV, which is theoretically impossible, and I evaporated everything off except for the dry weight of the ethyl ethanoate, there'd be 1,000 grams of it. What does that tell me about flavor? Absolutely nothing, right? It's just a number. And if you put a number on anything, someone wants to drink the highest. The only thing you can gauge from it is the higher that number is, the chances are the more developed and the more crazy flavors have it's had time to develop. If it's had time to develop that number up high, chances are it's got more of these other flavors. It doesn't tell me what you like. Someone who says, "Oh, I really like high ester rum," it's kind of like saying, "I like loud music." Like, okay, what type? Rock, reggae, rap, country, what type of, I don't care. I just want it loud. It's the same, it's the exact same mentality if you've ever drunk peated whiskey and if you ever got hooked on ppm years ago, where like, you had Octomore and they're putting the ppm on the bottle and everyone's like, oh, I want to try the smokiest whiskey in the world. And you know, then you'd have whiskey people come up to you at fairs and they're like, how many ppm is this? And you're like, yeah, like 30 ppm. And they're like, ha ha ha, children's whiskey, throw it away. Unless it's 100 ppm, I need to be physically choking on my whiskey in order for it to be smoky enough for me. Same, you see it with beer people all the time. I don't know if craft beer is a thing where you guys are all living, but you speak to a craft beer nerd, you're like, do you want to have a beer? And they're like, not that beer. And they open up their can of quadruple hot monster 10 times IPA, and it's not really like liquid coming out of the can. It's like dust and hops and regret. Those kind of people, as soon as you put a number on something, they want to drink the highest.
The correct answer to the beer question, though, Mitch, is West Coast IPA, San Diego style, circa like 2005. That's the correct answer to craft beer.
Nerd.
I I've discovered smoothie sours in the last couple of years, and I
Oh,
realized
there
I
So
can
good.
get cocktails in a can, and I'm very happy about it. Like,
you
give
go.
me a can of pina colada any day. Amazing.
Really
Now,
good.
we talked about Guyanese rum in the Solera and the heavier Guyanese component we use. This is part of what makes Guyana so unique. Their stills that they've saved, they have some wooden stills still in Guyana. So if you ever hear of the Enmore still, Port
Mm.
Morant, or Versailles still, these are the names of the wooden stills that are still running in Guyana. Um, they're not just pretty names. There's a place in Guyana called Enmore, a place called Port Morant, a place called Versailles. That's where those stills originated from. And over the years, they got rescued, moved, and they've all been saved and kept at this last distillery, Demerara Distillers. Wood is a crazy thing to make a still out of. You should never do that, but that's what they had back then. And the type of wood they use is a wood called greenheart, which is it's native to Guyana. They used it typically for things like piers or ship decks because it's a very tight grain wood, very hard wood, and it's very impervious to liquid. So it's better at handling liquid than say something that was more porous like oak or other things. And so these stills create very unique flavors, including these very big, heavy, chocolatey, licorice, very molasses forward kind of flavors in the rums. You also have sexy rum stills like these double retort pot stills popping up around the Caribbean. So um, this is, yeah, sexy rum technology. It's great. So you have the still on the right, big pot still. You put your fermented molasses in 7 to 9%. You then have these two retorts. Okay. I think in the whiskey world, they sometimes have thumpers that they will sometimes refer
Yeah,
to.
that's a bourbon technology, but yeah, you'll see thumpers often on column stills, not as often on pot stills.
Yeah. So this is something for us. It's exclusively a pot still thing in the Caribbean. Um, and it's really interesting how it works. So you put your initial wash in the big pot, then you put your low wines in that first retort, which will be at about 35% ABV. You put your high wines from the previous distillation in the second retort, which will be about 65% ABV. You heat up all three, the two retorts and the pot, as the alcohol hits, around that 72-degree mark. It comes over from the pot, hits the 35%. That heats up, goes into the 65%, comes off at around 80-85%. Some people describe it as doing a single, double, triple distillation, but in one batch. But that isn't really accurate, because if you were doing a triple distillation, you would start fresh with each distillation. You'd start back in the pot again. Each time it hits the low wines and the high wines, it's picking up congeners, it's picking up flavors, it's picking up esters from these previous distillations. So someone else described it as triple powered distillation, which I think is a nicer way of framing it, because it's picking up more and more flavor, and you're forcing more flavor into the liquid as it passes through this distillation process. Then you have the choice to age. As I say, in rum, aging is optional in most countries. And knowing where your rum aged is going to determine how that flavor develops. So if it ages in the Caribbean, that's a very different climate to aging it in Scotland. We do a mix of both. And it's important to sort of keep an eye on casks, because they all develop in different ways. You may have heard of tropical aging versus continental aging. Tropical aging we refer to as the country of origin, hotter climates, and continental aging being something cooler. With that, let's give you some more rum whilst we talk through some more geeky bits. So grab your Master Blenders Reserve 2022. We're jumping up in ABV now. We're going to 54.5%. And here we are blending much, much older rums, which I'm going to show you guys in a minute. But cheers. Enjoy this whilst we geek out over aging for a second. So, tropical versus continental. You'll sometimes hear rum people talk about, okay, if it's 5 years aged in the tropics versus 15 years in Scotland, then that's the equivalent. 5 years in the Caribbean is 15 years in Scotland. Yes and no. In terms of loss from the barrel, that can be a pretty accurate way of looking at it. In terms of the flavors that develop, if you took two sister casks, put one 5 years in Barbados, one 15 years in Scotland, bottled them and tried them next to each other, you would have two completely different rums. Okay. It's kind of like if you were cooking something and you took a piece of meat, cast iron pan, really hot, 2 minutes each side, or you slow cooked it for 24 hours, it's going to have a completely different flavor. Both can be great, both can be tasty, but you're going to have two very different dishes by the end of it. The same is true with your spirits. Where you age your rum is going to completely change the interaction that wood has with the liquid and the way that liquid develops. So in terms of loss, you can kind of see it on this graph, in Scotland, yeah, you might lose 1 or 2% per year. Over 5 years, you've lost 10%. Over 10 years, over 20 years, you've lost almost a third of the barrel. in the Caribbean, you see that loss can be up as high as 10%. So after 5 years, you're almost down to half the barrel. After 20 years, you hardly have anything left. So it's a very different rate of aging. And obviously we see this in the whiskey world too. You know, there are very hot climates, and you'll see often younger whiskies coming out because the hot climate has such a different effect on that liquid. But it's just something to bear in mind when you're looking at the age of your rums versus the age of your whiskies. You should always ask, where did it grow up? Because that climate is going to have a big impact on the overall process. Now, let's talk about the Master Blenders Reserve that's in your glasses now. So we've been doing this since 2020. So we've had 6 editions so far. We started with a rum called the 50th anniversary, which Andrew mentioned earlier. This is the one that kicked it all off. And then what we do every year is we take a little bit of the year's previous blend and we put it into the next one. So what we're doing for you guys tonight is we're trying the 22, which goes into the 23, into the 24, into the 25. So you're able to do a full vertical, horizontal, side by side of how these develop and how these change from year to year to year. They're always at 54.5%, which is full Navy strength. That's the issue. That's the strength they used to issue it to the Navy at. And always around a similar, similar quality, similar age profile that we're blending with the casks. But every year we're trying to get a very unique, very different flavor profile. They all do very well in all the awards and things like that, as you'll taste when you try it. Now, when Ollie first created this, he told me roughly, what his idea was for the 50th anniversary. And I was like, it sounds like you're going to blend some really cool rums. And then he showed me the final blend he came up with. And it was so unbelievable to me as a rum lover. I was like, surely you can't be blending all these things together in a bottle. And he's like, yeah, why not? And I was like, can we put all this information on the label? Because to me, it's mind-blowing that you'd have these rums together in a bottle. And he said, I don't know, because in the whiskey world, you're not allowed to put all the blend percentages, all the different distilleries and different ages on the bottle, because the SWA will come and tell you off and send you back home. But in rum, there is no rule that says you can't do that. And so we checked, and everyone was like, why would you do that? It's like, why not? There's no rule that says you can't be that transparent if you want to be. And this is the nice thing about rum. As much as there is, a lot of nonsense and marketing and pirates and sea monsters and things out there, there's also this other end of rum where you can be super informative, super transparent, give all this extra information, and you'll notice quite often the brands who are more along this line, who are giving you this extra information, that's normally like a green light of, okay, this rum will probably be decent. Like someone here is paying attention, someone cares. So these are our back labels. From the 50th anniversary, you see each country, distillery, type of still, years aged in the Caribbean, years aged in Scotland, and the blend percentage. 50th anniversary went into 21, and 2021 then went into the 2022, which we're trying now. Now, this is where it starts to get complicated. You can see the blend percentages here for the countries. This is helpful. Okay, so a third Guyana, so that chocolatey, heavy cacao kind of notes coming through. 25% Barbados and Trinidad, and 22 Trinidad. That's going to give you a lot of fruit. Jamaica's going to give you a little spice, a little funk. Perpetual blend, that refers to the previous year's rum that we've blended into it. But we also have this other little secret sauce that we add in, which are these flagons. Now, these flagons are basically rum from 1970 when Black Tot Day happened, when the Navy ended their rum ration. They had a problem because they still had a lot of rum left over, and they decided with all the remaining rum to put it into these stone jars and lock it away in a warehouse. 24 years later, they closed down the warehouse and sold off the land. They got rid of all the flagons. And one of these flagons ended up in Sukhinder Singh's hands in his office. He tried the rum. He couldn't believe what the rum was. He'd never tried a rum like it before. And he's like, where did this come from? He spent 2 years tracking down where all the flagons had ended up. Half had ended up in America, half had ended up in France. He bought all of them back and brought them to England and then had to figure out what to do with them. So inside these flagons is the Navy rum from 1970 and years before. If you ever see a box like this, call me immediately. This is a box that contains 2 flagons of Navy rum. If the flagons haven't leaked, it should weigh about 23.6 kilos. You'll see little clues on the box that tell you where and when this flagon comes from. So faded in red on the left, you see Antwerp. You see little details on the box like PKD 1155, so packed November 1955. You have to crowbar these things open. They're filled with sawdust. And inside, this is what you get. So these flagons covered in wicker to protect them. Underneath, they're this stone glazed ceramic. So they're not breathing like an amphora. They're airtight. And on top, you get a cork with a wax seal on top that will tell you where and when the flagon was bottled. So 12-70, December 1970, 5 months after Black Tot Day. These flagons are what we put into our original Black Tot, which was Black Tot Last Consignment. So the first ever Black Tot we released back in 2010 was just those flagons in a bottle. And it was actually a mix of some flagons from 1954 and 1970, because of course, the way the Navy were blending, they were topping up their blend every year. So every year the blend was changing, every year the flavor was changing. And Sukhinder found if you blended the two, you could create this, which is why if you ever get to try a flagon by itself, it won't taste exactly the same because this is a blend of 2 different eras. We probably have about 200, 300 bottles left of Last Consignment, and then it's gone. We can't make any more of it because we have more flagons, but we don't have the same ratio to ever create this blend again. And so the decision with Master Blenders was, what do we do when this rum runs out? And we wanted to create something as close as possible to this original Navy rum blend. So when we try Master Blenders 2022, you'll see the initial blend that we've worked with, but Ollie got a little bit overexcited, let's say, on this year, and he decided to create the world's best Jamaica rum blend. Like, he took the craziest cask of Jamaica rum he could find from Long Pond, Clarendon, New Yarmouth, put them all together, created this amazing blend. The rum was the youngest rum in there was 24 years old in this blend. He presented it to Sukhinder and he was like, that's amazing. How much would it be? He was like, about 900 euros a bottle. It's like, right. He's like, how many bottles did you get from the casks? Like, about 500 bottles. We needed about 5,000. He's like, okay. And it was an amazing blend, but he's like, but this is not what we're doing for Master Blenders. He's like, but Ollie had already blended these casks together. So then the question became, what do we do? Well, and he thought, well, maybe if I create a super blend of Guyana and then a super blend of Trinidad and then a super blend of Barbados. If you create 4 super blends and you blend them all together, you get a blend that looks like this. 20 different casks with, I see all the glasses going on. So 20 different casks. You see all the different distilleries, different stills, tropical aging, continental aging, blend percentage. We couldn't fit all of this on the label, so we had to do a country summary with a QR code, and the QR code takes you to the website and then gives you the full blend breakdown. There are some incredible rums in this list that are worth sort of noting out. You've got a 19-year-old Mount Gay in there. You've got some old Guyana. You've got a 30-year Demerara Distillers, an 18-year, some really old crazy rums in here. We're blending it with some younger rums because some younger rums give it some vibrancy. It gives it some lift. our goal with this is not to make the oldest rum imaginable. Otherwise, we'd just take one of these casks and bottle it by itself. We're trying to create flavor. We're trying to create these something that's more complex. And you need the young vibrancy, but you also need that old character that comes through in some of these old casks. The Jamaica blend that originally started all of this, you see 27-year-old New Yarmouth, 27-year-old Clarendon Estate, Long Pond. It's a crazy, crazy blend. In the Trinidad section, if you're not familiar with the distillery called Caroni, that's kind of the rum world's equivalent to Port Ellen, except we're not reopening it. So it closed down 20 years ago. People pay hundreds and thousands for bottles of Caroni now. It's crazy. It's a lost distillery from Trinidad that can never make that rum again. So it's a ridiculous blend of rum. What do you guys think? Do you like it?
Yeah, it's lovely. I was just saying in the chat, Mitch, that I remember when we did a tasting with the 50, the 20, 21, and 22. I don't know if the 23 was in that lineup, but the 22 is my favorite. And I kind of felt like starting with the 50th anniversary, the blends were progressively getting better and better each year. Now, I think we've gone a little further now, and so I have favorites in there. And just going from memory, I think the 2022 and 2024s are my favorites. But
Mm.
yeah, I love the elegance on this. Um, the 2023, I mean, I've jumped ahead a little bit here. As Harmony's nodding, I think she has too, because it's kind of fun to try these side by side and see where they're going. And the 23 seems more funky to me. And they're all kind of, I think, like you said before, they're very different. Like there's not an attempt to produce the same thing every year and just see how subtly different it is. Each year's rum is it's got a nod to the past rums, but each year's rum is its own unique creation.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. When he told me that these were all like a rum like progression, I took a sip, waited, took a sip, waited, and I tried each one in progression to see how they varied, and they do. And it's quite interesting.
Mhm. But I love that 2022. It's just bursting with flavor. Um, it's got a nice elegance to it. It's soft. I mean,
Mhm.
this is the kind of rum that appeals to someone who's more Scotch centric like me. Like it's just a really elegant, layered, complex spirit.
Mm. No, for me, it really shows the pinnacle of what rum blending can be.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's I think it's the geekiest rum blend in the world. I love it. It's definitely the most transparent rum blend in the world, so we can definitely claim that. Um, Brennan, you made a good point in the chat where you're talking about trying to identify where a certain flavor comes from, and obviously it can be different. The tricky part when you're blending, and something that you always need to consider, especially when we're talking about esters and the flavors that are formed, is sometimes uh, the more complex esters that you get are not one ester. Like if you smell chocolate in something, there is no one chemical compound in the world that smells like chocolate. It's about 20 different esters combined that will combine together to make the smell that we all go, ah, that's chocolate. So when you have some of these really long chain complex esters, sometimes we're looking through a list like this and we're going, oh, I got banana. Which one's giving me banana? Is there Worthy Park? I can't find Worthy Park. Okay, well, which one's the banana one? And sometimes it's not one cask, but it's the combination of all of these casks starting to come together where they're different esters, they're different congeners, they're different flavors combined, and they make something that isn't in any one individual cask. So that's one thing to consider with a blend, which makes it part of what makes it so exciting and interesting. The other interesting thing to note as well, you talked about well, something, something like a Caroni makes up such a small part of the blend, or the flagons, right? That we put flagons into the master blenders every year as well. That's one of Ollie's things. He always likes to add a few flagons in. Um, and it's, some people look at it, oh, it's only 0.7%. It's like 8 flagons we put in, right? Which is about 32, 34 liters of rum. But think of it like cooking. Okay. If you were cooking something and I said, hey, it needs a bit more salt, you probably wouldn't add 10% salt to your dish, right? You'd probably add a pinch. It might be like 0.05% of salt. But that salt then completely transforms the rest of a dish, brings out flavors that you weren't tasting before. But without the salt, you notice it. Same with chili, right? You probably wouldn't add a whole handful of chilies to something, but you might add a couple of chilies, and that flavor brings up everything else. When you have very potent components like these Jamaicas, like there's only what 7% Jamaica blend total, but Jamaica is the spice, Jamaica is the chili in the sauce, right? You add too much, the whole thing will get blown out. The Coroni, okay, it's only 1.5%, but again, it's such a potent rum. So these flavors that we work with don't get fooled by the blend percentages. Sometimes the bigger percentages might be a lighter style rum, and so it's a bigger body to build off. But then the really potent ones, sometimes you just add a little bit on. So just a couple of things to keep in mind as we look, because the next couple of years get pretty complex as well.
Well, on that note, Mitch, and just to keep things running here, maybe we could move on to the 2023 and see what makes that one a little different.
Here we are. So the 2023. So as you'll see, we've got one extra country in the blend on this one. We've got a 29-year-old Grenadian component because Ollie said it needed a bit more citrus. And the only way he could find it was a 29-year-old Grenadian rum, which is why we love Ollie. The blend for this is equally complex. In fact, it's slightly more complex this year. This is probably the most complex one we've ever done. And the reason why is you'll notice that within the blends on this one, he's actually used some of the super blends from the previous year. So he's used the Barbados super blend from 22 and then added more casks on top of that. And the Jamaica super blend then added some Worthy Park. Trinidad super blend then added some Trinidad distillers. There's one unique distillery in here, which should be noted, which is Ten Cane. It's another lost distillery from Trinidad. It was a failed Moët Hennessy project from years ago where they wanted to do cane juice rum on Trinidad. It was an amazing idea, but no one understood it at the time. And so they shuttered it after a few years. But it turns out if you keep that 10 cane and age it in a cask for a really long time, it tastes amazing. But that 10 cane is the only cane juice rum that we've ever blended into Black Tot. So you'll see a little bit of cane juice in this blend. I love this rum. 23, I think, is one of those blends that every time I taste it, it will have a completely different feeling depending on the day. Like sometimes it's more chocolatey, sometimes I get more fruit, sometimes I get more spice, sometimes it's some combination of the three. Most of them I know by heart, like I've tried so often. I know, that's 22, that's 24, very, straight away. 23 is always like, oh, what's it going to taste like today? It's so much going on in this one.
It's interesting you mentioned the wanting to add more citrus because that's definitely there. But this one to me also somehow seems more funky and more earthy than the last one. And I'm trying to like there. I remember when I first took a sip of it, there was almost a moment where there was something that was faintly smoky about it. And I don't know if it's maybe that higher. Is there a higher Guyana component this time around? Like, what's the? I mean, the Jamaica component's only 9%, so it might not, it's probably not just that.
Yeah, I think well, again, the 9%, we've upped it from 7. It's a little bit spicy, you could say, on this
Mhm.
one. Um, the the introduction of things like 10 cane of the Grenada as well. The Grenada's a beautiful big flavor. And again, don't be fooled by small percentage shifts, because sometimes those small little touches really have a big impact depending on the cask. Um, but I think what I like about this one with 2022, we have an idea every year of what Sukhinder and Ollie are hoping to create. And with 2022, Sukhinder's brief to Ollie was he opened a bottle of 1970s Barbancourt and said, make this. And Ollie said, well, how can we make 1970s Barbancourt? That doesn't exist. And then they started opening a few old rums, and the idea sort of came out, well, what are the old flavors in rum that you don't get anymore? And one of these flavors, which they found in things like Last Consignment, was this dusty chocolate, dusty cocoa kind of note. And so in 2022, Ollie's whole obsession became about like creating this dusty chocolate, old flavor, very old style kind of rum, which is why a lot of people like the 22, because for me, it's a very traditional Navy style rum. Like if you like Last Consignment, if you like these older styles, if you like the 50th anniversary, you'll probably like 22 and the 25 when we come to it. 23 is a complete different direction. So Ollie tends to love the fruitier, funkier, uh, more vibrant, more citrusy style rum blends. Sukhinder loves the old, heavy, deep, dark Guyana, Demerara, those rich, heavy Navy style rums. And so you'll often see from year to year, you can see, this was one of the Sukhinder years, or this was one of the Ollie years, depending on who was sort of like leading the brief on that year. So 23, we get a lot more fruit. There's still that chocolate. There's still a lot of that Guyana in there. But for me, the chocolate and the fruit come together. You almost get this chocolate raisins kind of note coming in the 23, which I love chocolate raisins. So that works for me.
Fair. Okay.
And, and then we come to 2024. So in 2024, we get a whole different approach,
Yeah.
where we decided to have a hero country. And this is this is a good example of what happens when the marketing team comes up with a great plan where they say, hey, for the next 4 years, let's have a different hero country every year.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
decided to start with Barbados. Uh, and then the next year they changed their mind, and then we never did it again. But so for 2024, we have a hero country, which is Barbados. And that becomes the sort of core of the blend. So we put that at the front, 60%. Then we did 25% Trinidad. So Barbados and Trinidad are both very fruit forward, lots of vanilla and coconut. Barbados gives you lots of tropical fruit flavors. Trinidad gives you lots of peaches, apricots, these stone fruit kind of flavors. Jamaica is more fruit, but more that overripe bananas, pineapples, those kind of notes.
Mhm.
Little bit of Guyana. This is the smallest amount of Guyana you'll see in any of our master blenders. So if you don't like that chocolatey note so much, we've dropped that right down in this one. And then the perpetual blend, the blend from the previous year and the casks, it's quite small, this one. So only 5% coming through. So this, just by reading numbers, you go, okay, this should be the lightest, fruitiest, juiciest rum out of the master blenders. And I think it really comes through when you
Mhm.
taste it. So here's everything in the blend. Have a try, have a taste, see what you think.
Mitch, I think what I really like about this, and I think I said before that the 2025 I don't know as well. I think I've only tried it once. But of the 50th anniversary up to the 2024, the 2022 and 2024 have been my favorite. And I think the reason I like this is that it's what I like about old single malt whiskey from refill casks. It's a bit more naked. It allows the distillate to shine through. The oak doesn't feel quite as heavy on it. It feels like it's a much lighter touch. And I
Mm.
think that's what I really like about this is it reminds me of like tropical old single malts that are from refill casks and just elegant, bright, fruity, exotic.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, vibrant. It's for me. This is uh each of the master blenders for me has an occasion attached to it, right? Like I remember the first couple came out and everyone's like, well, which one's your favorite this year, that year? But now over the years, it's like, okay, each one has its own occasion for me. So
Mhm.
22 is more my nightcap rum. That's like my end of the night, 5 a.m. Let's finish off the night. 23 is more when I want something a bit more challenging, a bit more complex. I want to really like, think about what I'm drinking. 24 is the daytime master blenders. That's your breakfast rum. That's your 11 a.m. tot. That's your,
Mhm.
you know, easy drinking. Like you could definitely have two or three in a sitting and you'd be very happy with that. Um, and then 25 is something else entirely, which we'll try in a second.
Mhm. Harmony, any thoughts you want to share on this one or the last one? Nope. She's saying nope. Nope. She's good. She's all good. All right, Mitch. I think we're ready to go on to 2025.
All
So
right.
what have we got? Dark chocolate, licorice, and grapefruit, huh?
So yeah, so these are some of the notes that you'll be finding in this. There's a few dozen more, but it's this is what looked pretty on the picture. Um, 2025, Sakinda wanted to go back to the 50th anniversary because it was a lot of people's favorite when we first brought it out. It was I think it's kind of like it's your first love, right? When the first one you try is always your favorite. And it's almost impossible to find 50th anniversary anymore. It's really if you find one, just buy it, get it straight away. Um, so Skinner kind of wanted to go back to that idea. It was from 50th anniversary, 2025 was the 55th anniversary. So he wanted to return to that style, go back to that classic, heavier Navy rum style, that richer profile. Um, and so to do that, heavier on the Guyana again, uh, a little bit more of an increase on the Jamaica than we've had for a little while. Uh, 24% Barbados, only 4% Trinidad, but it's a big Trinidad, which we'll see in a second. And then a big chunk of the perpetual blend here, which this one is unusual. This is not like the others. So when we look at our perpetual blend,
Oh yeah.
we've actually got a sherry butt of the 50th anniversary, which had been aging for another 5 years. So Ollie had kept a cask aside, 500 litre cask of 50th anniversary, and he used that as part of the perpetual blend for this one, plus some of the 2024, plus another eight flagons or so, plus a cask of 27-year-old Carony, plus plus some Worthy Park, 18-year Foursquare, 7-year Foursquare, 21-year-old Guyana, and a 12-year-old Port Moranton there. One of my requests for the 2025 after 3 years of very complex blends was to Ollie, could we reduce the blend scale a little bit so that we can fit it all back on the label again? And amazingly, he agreed. So we've managed to get all of the casks back on the label. So it's much easier to just pick up the bottle and see straight away, okay, this is what's inside there. Um, and yeah, it's a delicious blend, again, very classic Navy style, much heavier, much drier, much more complex. Um, and yeah, a delicious little tot. So cheers.
No, no, that's lovely, Mitch. Um, Mitch, this makes me think of something with when you talked about the original Black Tot, going back to the basic rum, Finest Caribbean, that
Mm,
all these concept, like he didn't really have a strategy, was he wanted to make a rum that he would like, essentially, like a rum that would appeal to someone who's predominantly a whiskey drinker. If you were to compare the old recipe Black Tot to the current one, would one of those be more emblematic of what the original Royal Navy style rum, like what like, and I mean not the Royal Navy style rum 50 years later from a flagon, but do we have a sense of like which of those might be more representative of the Royal Navy style rum back in the day?
I think I mean the Master Blenders definitely gets probably the closest flavor profile wise in terms of uh,
Hmm.
the ABV, the complexity and things going on in there. But interestingly, one of the one that reminds me of it most on the nose is the historic Solera.
Hmm.
One of the reasons is when you look at the era that the Navy were blending from 1804 till 1970, bourbon casks weren't really a thing. It was
Right.
mainly sherry transport casks, sherry casks, port casks, all different types of wood.
Yeah.
Bourbon casks by this era hadn't really flooded the market. And so when you smell Solera and if you smell Last Consignment and you compare those two, you'll see a lot more uh, brotherhood
Hmm.
between those two than you will on the nose with the other ones. So I think if you could
Interesting.
have sort of a love child between historic Solera and either the 22 or 25, then you'd have a
Hmm.
pretty good uh,
Very cool.
dupe for a Old Navy rum in there.
Well, I'm conscious of the time because I know it's almost breakfast time for you there in France, which I imagine that's a good time to have a breakfast cocktail, some kind of tropical fruit and rum. But what I'm going to do now, normally we would do the speed round, whatnot. What I'm going to just do is I'm going to put the poll up and let people vote to pick their favorites. Um, Evan often has a cheeky third question, and it looks like he does this time. Uh, Best holiday with a coincidental drinking theme. So there you go. There's some choices there for you. Mitch, Harmony, and I unfortunately don't get to vote, but we do get to share our favorites verbally. Now, Mitch, I'm going to put you on the spot just because you know these rums backwards and forwards. If you could pick your
Mm,
three favorites, if we had to pin you down tonight, recognizing that it could be
yeah,
different on a different day, what would your three favorite rums be
three favorites from everything we've tried
from what
tonight,
we tried
or
tonight? Yeah.
uh 22, 23, and Solera.
Okay. Cool. Harmony, same question for you.
22. I thought it was 23, but maybe 24. And the Caribbean Finest.
Mm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to deviate slightly,
Hmm.
although I'm on the same page for the first two for you guys, 22, 24, and I'm going to go 2025. I
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more settled down. I like the Black Tot historic Solera. And Mitch, I recognize that I'm not the target demographic, but I think for me, like if I did one thing with that, I would dial the sherry back just slightly, like
Mhm.
10%, because it just seems like it's so loud and chocolatey, but I like it because I think it's closer to the original recipe Black Tot Finest Caribbean. So that might be my new Black Tot Finest Caribbean. I'm just going to bring historic Solera home to make boozy rum cocktails.
I like
Amazing.
it.
Do it.
The Solera's fun. It's very loud.
Yeah,
So
it
for
is.
people who
Yeah.
like loud
But I
music,
think
that's
that's what makes a
a
great
fun.
cocktail spirit. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not sure that I would drink it neat the way I would the master blenders. But I mean, it's like I don't make as many whiskey cocktails with scotch as I do with bourbon. And it's not
Yeah.
because I like bourbon better than scotch. It's because it's kind of a little bit loud and obnoxious and it works well in a cocktail. I mean, I think
Yeah.
for me, that's what I'm looking for. Now, Mitch, I recognize you're a much more experienced and sophisticated bartender than I am. But that's just my strategy
At times.
for making cocktails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to make more cocktails though. Having tried this and experienced cocktails a little bit,
Mhm.
it's not generally my thing, mixing drinks.
Mhm.
I want to drink neat generally. But after having the Solera, I want to explore cocktails with it. I think it
Mhm.
would be a lot of fun.
All right,
It
I'm
is.
going to end the poll here. We'll see what the results are. So, first favorite rum in the lineup tonight, it's the 2025. So look at that. People
New
hearkening
school.
back to that 50th anniversary release. The
Wow.
2023 coming in second. So look at that. I am not in lockstep with the people, but it could be the people here are more rum people than I am. So respect to them. Second favorite, 2023 and 2025. So I think it's pretty clear. People like those 2023 and 2025 releases, and
Mm.
Yeah.
everything got a vote, including someone picked the Black Tot Finest Caribbean as their first favorite rum in the tasting. So I gotta love that.
They're
Uh,
classy
best
people.
was that Harmony?
I said they're classy people.
They are classy people.
I like them.
Best holiday with a coincidental drinking theme. Black Tot Day finishing second. Robbie Burns Day third. No votes for St. Patrick's Day or New Year's Eve. But the winner was Tuesday, which is preceded by the also important Monday and followed by the just as crucial Wednesday. By my counts, there are at least 7 very significant drinking holidays every week. So, you know what? That might be my favorite Evan cheeky third question answer
It's
we've
it's
had
pretty good.
yet. So, there we go. Before we wrap, I don't know if anyone has any quick questions they want to ask Mitch in the chat before we close her off for the evening and let everyone go on their merry way or on their merry tomorrow, as will be the case for Mitch.
Mitch is ready
Um,
for breakfast, I think.
yeah.
Or at least
Just
a
need-
coffee.
I just need some croissants to roll in, and then we'll
Oh
be
my
good.
God,
So.
yeah.
The
Um,
question in the chat is, what is Mitch having for breakfast?
I think he just told us
Yeah.
croissants.
Croissants.
Croissants and rum. Let's go. Rob, you've got a question?
Oh, here, Rob
Rob,
wants to, here, we'll let him
I will
unmute.
unmute if I
Okay,
can. Maybe.
just a second.
There we go.
Hey, Mitch, thanks for coming out and either staying up late or getting up early. Good to see you again.
Good to see
Um,
you, Rob.
I'm not sure if you can share if you know, but I've heard rumors that the Master Blenders Reserve is going away, and then I've heard rumors it's coming back. So what's 2026 in store for Master Blenders?
Yeah, this is a
Oh,
hotly contested topic at the moment. I would say it
Do we need
really,
to turn off the recording? It's like,
no, I think it's fair. We're there are discussions at the moment whether to continue on Master Blenders in its current guise or whether to change it. One thing is definitely changing, which will be a really cool addition, is that Ollie has now invested in a very cool blending vat, where he's going to be able to really hone in on the perpetual blend side of Master Blenders Reserve. So that's going to be a really nice aspect that we're introducing in. But there are talks of changing how we do it slightly and modifying it slightly. So what I would say is if you enjoy the Master Blender series, to be safe, I would definitely be stocking up on the years,
read between the lines, Rob, I think
just
is
in
what
case.
we're hearing here.
Thank you for sharing, Mitch.
Yeah, I'm fighting the corner of it continuing on and for many more years in this way. But if it changes, you'll want to make sure you have all of these bottles. So
Okay,
Thank
there we
you. I
go.
stocked up on 2021.
good man.
Well, it looks like that might be it for questions. Um, Mitch, once again, want to thank you very much for joining us at the start or just prior to your vacation somewhere in the south of France from a mysterious stone cave, which looks quite cool, it must be said. Like that's a
Do you want to see the stone cave? This is
yeah,
a good friend of mine, Chris von Stedink, who's bringing out his own rum brand very soon. Actually, he's a big rum lover. But yeah, so this is his little underground rum cave. This is one wall of some of the rum. This is another wall of some of the rum.
amazing.
And all the things that we're surrounded with here. So this is how a good rum cave should look, I think. If you were going to have an evil layer, this would be where to do it.
I think so.
But thank you guys. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Does everyone have a little rum left to do a little
Sure
toast
do.
to finish up?
Yeah.
So we'll do the thing that we should never ever do in a Zoom call, where I'm going to ask you all to unmute simultaneously, and we're going to do a little toast together, because
Okay.
it's really weird if we don't.
Here, let me just Mitch, I think I have to do let me just see here. What do I have to do? I don't know if I
You
can.
did it.
Can everyone unmute at this point?
No, can I?
I think I have to like do it one by one. Hold on.
No help. I'll sit at the bottom.
Oh God.
We're good. We're unmuted.
There we go. All right. I think we're good, Mitch.
Okay, so gonna get your glasses and repeat after me, and you have to do the arm movements, okay? It's very
Okay.
important. All right. So there are tall ships.
There are
Yeah,
tall ships.
No, we've got to get this coordinated. Come on, I know you're all in different places, but let's do this. Ready? So there are tall ships,
There are tall ships.
and there are small ships,
And there are small ships.
and there are ships that sail the sea.
And there are ships
There are
that
ships
sail the
that
sea.
But the best ships
But the best ships
are friendships.
are friendships.
So here's to you and me.
Here's to you.
Here's to you and
Cheers,
me.
everyone.
Cheers,
Cheers.
everyone.
Cheers.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Mitch, once again, thank you for this. Enjoy your vacation, enjoy the rum cave, and enjoy your croissants, more importantly.
No, thank you guys, and please, if anyone wants to stay in touch, I'll put my email in the comments as well, so you've got that. You've got my Instagram handles and Black Tot handle here.
Yep.
Any questions, anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay.
Yeah. Mitch at blacktot.com. Mitch, thank you very much. One last quick thank you for Pacific Wine and Spirits and Bernadette for their support. They're always great. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the tasting, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.